Hey, what's up, guys? This is Mr. Madrid from the Mr. Madrid podcast, and today we have another special guest by the name of Heidy De La Cruz. She is somebody that I actually recently met, and funny enough, when we were having a conversation, she let me know that she has her own podcast. She was letting me know a little bit about exactly what the podcast entails, and then some other cool stuff that you guys will be privy to in a little bit. But just want to welcome you to the show. Thank you
Thank
so much for
you.
coming on, and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. Who is Heidi De La Cruz?
Who is Heidi De La Cruz? That is a very good question. I love to start off saying that first and foremost, I am a child of God, so daughter of Christ, and wife, mom, business owner, podcaster, writer. I wear many hats. I have my 9 to 5, so I do medical coding analyst, and yeah, that's. I think that pretty much sums me up. Who am I?
Nice,
Yeah.
nice. So, tell us a little bit about your current podcast.
hmm
How long have you been doing it? What is it about?
Yeah. So my podcast is called The American Dream in the Eyes of Immigrants. And it's immigrants just coming on and sharing their journey of coming to the United States. We talk about culture shock that they experienced, the events that led them to move to the United States, how they navigated to living in a new country, adapting to a new culture, language. And a lot of times the guests have their own businesses. So I give them the opportunity to promote any services that they're offering, products and things like that. I started April of 2022, so it's almost 2 years. How time just flies. But God really put it in my heart to start a podcast in 2019. I was telling you a little bit before we started recording that I had been following this podcaster Jamie Ivey from the Happy Hour podcast since 2019. I had went to a Lifeway Women Live conference here in Orlando. They were hosting it here, and she was actually the host. So like I followed all the guest speakers that were there, followed her, and I love the concept of her podcast. She just had a friend come on and just talk about the good things that God was doing in their life. So if they had a business, talk about their business. If they were authors, talk about their book. But it was all faith based, right? And just having good conversations. And she's had different topics and stuff that she'll talk about in her podcast, but it's all faith based, how we can get closer to Jesus and things like that, and how we can love people better. And so I was like, I love that. I've been listening to podcasts for years, and then just going listening to her. So I was like, I would love to do that. So just talk to people, talk about life. So that's how initially my podcast was going to be. And I had even thought about starting a podcast about talking different topics, like sharing opinions, right? And just talking to people who have different opinions than I do, just and not debate or anything like that. It's just sharing opinions, listening to different perspectives, why they think that way, and their upbringing and stuff. But I didn't want to do it on my own. I was like, I know that there's going to be a lot of behind the scenes work. I just want to host and like have somebody else take care of everything. So I was trying to actually find a co-host. It's like somebody to do it with me, but I couldn't. So I think that really like held me back for a few years. But then also like 2020 happened, and I was dealing with a lot of mental health issues. 2021, what happened in 2021? Okay, I was pregnant, and so I couldn't, dealing with that pregnancy. I just couldn't at the time. And then finally in 2022, beginning of 2022, I was on maternity leave, and I was like, okay, I have a few extra time. Like I'm done with my master's. We're on the end of it. So I was like, let me research how to start a podcast. Like I really want to start this podcast. The feeling hasn't gone away. Like I want to do this. So I literally Googled how to start a podcast. So overwhelmed with all the information that's out
Yeah.
there. But I was just like, you know what? Just gotta, see what I have to do and just make a plan. So that's exactly what I did. And so as I was like researching on starting a podcast, since I'm a writer, I write on Medium. And then I was reading this article. She was an immigrant from Kenya, and she wrote in that article about each cultural shock that she experienced here in the United States really diminished her confidence. And so I was like, wow, this is heartbreaking because, like, when you're in your home country, you're you're yourself, you feel confident, it's your language, family's there. But
Right.
then when you're in a foreign land, it's kind of like, where do I fit in? you
Yeah.
know so I was just reading that and I was like, man, this is so heartbreaking. And then I remember after reading, I went to ask my husband, because he came when he was 9. I was like, hey, do you remember when you first got here to the United States? He was like, very vividly. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh. So he's telling me his experience, and I was like, that's a podcast episode right there, just from
Yeah.
like what you remember just from coming here. And so I was like, you know what? That's what I want the podcast to be about. I was like, I'm gonna interview immigrants. We're just gonna talk about their journey of coming, how they adapted. I want to learn about the cultural shocks that they experience. I was like, I'm not getting into the politics of it. I don't
Yeah.
want to get into the messiness of it. We're just gonna share immigrant stories. And that's how the American Dream in the Eyes of Immigrants was born. I started with friends and family, because my whole family came from the Dominican Republic. And then I've even interviewed my husband in an episode with his siblings. And yeah, so it's just grown from there.
That is so awesome. That's an amazing story. It really resonates with me because I just think about times that I've had conversations with people who, you know, I'm from New York City. So being there is like I grew up in a predominantly Dominican neighborhood and I worked in the hospitality industry. And there was a lot of people there that were immigrants and
Yeah.
they came to this country with the American dream in mind
Mm.
and,
Yeah.
hustling and trying their best to just move, get ahead, make sure that their kids have a great education and
Yeah.
upbringing. And I think that's super inspiring that you're creating a platform for people to go ahead and share their story.
And that's the main thing that my guest thanks me for, just for that platform, the safe space for them to share their story. Because they say, like, we don't see this a lot. Like, just knowing their story, right? Just hearing about what they went through and things like that. And I was like, yeah, like I didn't see it.
Yeah.
Now that after I started, I've been connected with other podcasters that share like similar to the immigrant story, but not exactly like how I have it. But it's just like those stories matter. It's what
Yeah.
really makes
100%.
this country so great, just the diversity that's here. Like, you literally can have like the whole world in like one country.
Yeah, I think the just the title immigration sometimes gives off like a bad
Mm-hmm.
vibe to
Yep.
people, and it's just like there is beauty in it. Obviously, everybody wants to come into this country, the land of dreams and things of that nature, to do good.
Yeah.
Not everybody that comes through the border or however they get here is looking to come here and do bad. A lot of people are escaping, poverty
Yep.
and lack of opportunities, and that's super awesome that you give a platform to people like that.
And a lot of people come for education. That's a really common answer.
Yeah,
They
because
come for school.
also, I think it's
Mm-hmm.
so from what I've heard too, like in stories, is like in other countries, like you can get education, but then like the job doesn't pay
Yeah. Yeah.
what something here in the States would pay.
Mm-hmm.
Like doctors in certain countries don't get paid anything,
Yeah.
and but that's super awesome. Ultimately, like, what would you say? Aside from that inspired you to just pick immigration? Is it something that you saw
Oof.
within you that you were like, I know you said your background is Dominican. Is it something that you attached to in that sense?
Yeah, yeah. First, it was also the negative aspect that the media spins out on immigration, because I say that my mission is to change the narrative of immigration to a more compassionate and empathetic approach, and I just really believe that sharing the stories is the best way to do that. So the negative aspect of immigration that's out there right now really sparked it, but then also just my experience growing up with my parents as
Yeah,
immigrants, right? So I'm first generation, and just remembering like having to translate for my dad documents, important documents and things like that, having to go with him to doctor's appointments to translate, having, because I grew up in Michigan, so it wasn't back then a very bilingual heavy population. Right now
yeah,
there's more Hispanics and things like that, but so like you go to the doctor's office, not a lot, the staff didn't speak Spanish, right? So I would have to go with him. So just my own experience is really what sparked it too, because growing up as a child of immigrants, having parents as immigrants, like, you pretty much have to like pretty much navigate stuff on your own. Like, for
yeah,
example, like when I went to college, like I had to figure out FAFSA on my own, like how to apply for these student loans and stuff like that, because unfortunately I didn't like really have that. My parents couldn't really navigate that. Like they were learning with me, right?
Yeah.
So just my own experience really is also what helped, because I've also interviewed children of immigrants and things like that, just because we have a very different experience as opposed to children whose parents were born here.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I remember. It's funny because I remember those even till today. Like I'm remembering the whole translating portion. I,
Oh
I
man.
grew up with a single mom, and it was four of us, but we're all 8 years apart. And just the other day, she's like, Anthony, like she calls me out the blue.
It doesn't stop.
She's like, "Aquí hay un hombre, like there's a man here trying to talk to me. I don't know. Hold on." And hands the phone. I'm like, Mom, I'm at work. Like,
Yeah.
what's going on? I'm like,
Yes.
and then like you kind of have to take a step back and remember, like,
Mm-hmm.
she needs me.
Yeah.
And I think the beauty in having stories and sharing stories like that is seeing how people come from nothing.
Yeah.
Like, you barely have two nickels to rub to, you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like to really
Mm-hmm.
make something happen. And those are one of the things that, like, I was also a taxi driver in New York City, and I had so
Mm.
many people, so many awesome conversations with people that, were coming from out of the country and all walks of life. But the most fascinating ones to me were those that got it from the dirt. Like they
Mm.
started
Yeah.
from the bottom,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like you become an advocate of that. Like
Yeah.
obviously by default we already have to support immigration because
Mm-hmm.
that's how we came about.
Yeah.
But I think it's awesome when people have those success stories when they come here and they're behind,
Yeah.
and put their kids through college, they get themselves a house, and they give those opportunities that they didn't have for
Yeah.
themselves. And what gets deeper into that is the fact that they have to sacrifice their own dreams
Mm-hmm.
for their kids.
Yep.
Is there something that you could share when it comes to that? Like it's kind of struggles that people that you've interviewed may have had with that, like giving up their own dreams for the greater good.
So I like to ask my guests, like, did they have any expectations of the United States versus their reality? Because
Yeah,
the like, there's TV shows, there's books, there's movies, and things like that, and a lot of them, like, they have, depending on which country they come from, because some countries don't have like Western TV shows and things like that. So a lot of them will say, like, yeah, like, you see these movies and these things, but then when you come here, like, you have to work hard. You literally are
yeah,
starting from zero. So it's just like it'll take them longer to get to where they want to be, because again, they're starting from zero. But the good thing is, like, the opportunities that are available here, and it's just crazy to hear, like, when they first got here and then learning how they navigated everything, and then like, oh, okay, I started a business and this is what inspired it, and
yeah,
things like that. And then obviously there's some that I interview that are kids, like they didn't have a choice. It
yeah,
was, their parents made the choice for them, but uh, ultimately it is the parents thinking for their kids' future. It's like, I want my kids, to be able to have these opportunities that we didn't have, in our home country and things like that. So it's definitely, I think that in itself is a huge sacrifice that the
yeah.
parents are doing for their kids. I have this one guest, her episode isn't published yet, but her mom sent her and her brother. She came first. Her mom came first to the United States, and she sent for them to come through the border from Mexico.
Mhm.
And in the process, her and her brother were split. Yes, so
Wow.
she had to come by herself. She was 5. Her brother was, I think, I can't remember his age, but he was a little older. So yeah, instead of like having them together, cross together, they split them, and then they crossed, and then they were able to be reunited in Arizona. I was like, I as a mother cannot imagine.
Wow.
Yes,
Lose my
like,
mind.
I know, I could not imagine. And she said, like, her brother doesn't remember the trip at all. I think just the trauma, like, he like blocked it out. I was like,
Yeah,
that makes sense. But I was just like, I cannot imagine doing that. But like, that is just like, it's not an easy decision that people make, which is what the media tries to portray. There's like, oh, they're invading our country, blah blah blah. But it's like, a lot of these people don't even want to leave. It's
yeah.
just out of necessity,
Like who
you
wants to
know?
leave their home?
That's what I'm.
Yeah, like that's
Yes.
really the way we can all sometimes, and I guess for lack of better words, myself included, be hypocrites to certain conversations until
Yeah.
you really put yourself in those shoes. And when you have no other option, it's like
Mhm.
imagine for a mother, um you're a mother, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. Like
Mm-hmm.
you give birth to something, you go through the 9, 10 months, give or take a couple
Yeah, it's
weeks.
10 months, guys. It's actually 10
That's why I'm
months.
like, give or take. And you give birth, and you're in a country or a surrounding that's just not,
Yeah.
it's not fulfilling. It's not, it doesn't do it as far as like long term success for you and your child. And it's like you give that up, like you get them to the age where they could walk, and you're basically like, here,
Mm-hmm.
take my child. And I
Exactly.
think that right there is powerful. Like people need to take that into account and say, damn, okay, they're invading. That's one way to look at it. Now let's play devil's advocate. Let's look at it both ways. What's the flip side to that? Like, what are we looking at as far as,
Mm-hmm.
if you were in that person's shoes, would you just give up your child just cause? And it's not just one person
Yeah.
doing it; it's hundreds of people that are just like, take my child.
And yeah.
So it's sad.
And I like to think of it also. Actually, this organization that I follow on Instagram is called Women of Welcome, and they are advocates for immigration, but to view it as a biblical perspective, right? To treat them how Jesus would want you,
Mhm.
right? To be
Yeah,
to treat them. And one of the things that they had asked was like, what if it is God calling them to this country? What
yeah,
if they're just following what God is telling them to do?
yeah,
And I was like, wow, of course the media doesn't say that, but it was
yeah,
like that is something to think about. It's like, because they say, the majority of people from Latin America, they're Catholic. Like
yeah,
Catholic is a huge
yep,
religion out there, so they're faith-based people, like they believe in God. So it's like, so what if they are just following God's calling, and
yeah.
God tells them that this is where they need to be?
So that's the beautiful thing about it, right? Like it's so awesome that you said that, because it applies to everything.
Mm-hmm.
Like even when you were talking about like taking interest into podcasting, it's no different than like the story that you mentioned. Like as far as like maybe God is putting that thought, that idea into the person's mind, and
Yeah.
that's the way I look at everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, who am I not to take action on something that God blessed me with?
Yeah.
And it's so cool that you said that, because I don't hear it that often, but it's true. It's like, it's with anything. It's like the ideas that you get, even as strong as immigrating to another country for a better life in hopes.
Yeah.
That's the other thing too. You're taking a gamble in hopes of a better life.
Yes.
So it's
Yeah.
not it's not like you're just leaving and it's like guaranteed. You come here and you're
Yeah,
set.
because there's hardships here.
Yes.
There's poverty here,
Yep. So there's
ghettos
like
here.
you're taking a chance all around, and it's
Mm-hmm.
just like that. That's such a powerful way to look at it too. Is like I'm a very spiritual too. I watch church every Sunday. I at least try to,
Yeah.
and I think it's like almost like a morning coffee, but it sets my week off right. You
Mm.
know what I mean? Like I
Yeah.
watch my church. I sit down, I tune in, and it just like it does something for me. And I'm a firm believer in that. And that's um, with that thought too is the same reason why I think me and you are very alike in that sense. Like you say that when you have a thought, like you don't mind being curious and
Yeah.
going into walking into different worlds and learning about it and
Mm-hmm.
see where it goes. And I think that comes from God. Like who else can put it,
Yep.
put that in your
I have
brain?
that. Yeah, I have that curiosity. It's like, but why? Why do you think like that? Or tell me about your upbringing,
Yeah.
because we are the way we are because of what has happened to us and our experiences growing up
Yeah,
and,
100%.
our environment.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like my mom. I'll tell you a little bit of the story with my mom. My mom got to this country when she was 19
Mm.
with my dad, who was a little bit older than her. And back in the days, in our parents' days, um, age gaps were kind of normal.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
My
Like,
grandparents were like 16 years apart, something
there you
like
go.
that.
Like,
Yeah.
and that was normal.
Yeah.
So there was a gap in age there, and he was more what my Dominican people say, un tigre. Like he was more out there. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like he knew the streets. He knew, and my mom wasn't. She was timid, but she
Mm.
took the chance. And being
Mm-hmm.
scared, not knowing English in the
Yeah.
'70s, being scared of immigration. That's another thing. People like back in. I don't know how old your parents are, but I'm assuming it's around the same era as my mom. And it's like back in those days, it was serious. Like people were told not to go outside and things like that. Those are also
Mm-hmm.
stories that I've heard of people being traumatized and not wanting to go out.
Yeah.
And then even like stories that you hear on the news now where it's like these immigrants that come to the country have kids and they get separated.
Oh, yeah.
Like again, like we said, like you're coming to this country for hope.
Yeah.
And it's like I know it's like nobody wants to leave their home, and you're leaving your home for that hope, and
Yeah.
then to get separate. Like it's very traumatizing too. That what goes into that, like the story that you had about the kid that finally reunited in Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
Like all of that stuff is real scary.
Yeah, for
It's
sure. Yeah, and that's why well, I send my guest questions beforehand, and I do include the question like what events led you guys to move, and because I want them to be comfortable, because it can be very traumatic. It could be
yeah,
like, something that like, oh no, don't really want to talk about, and then it's like, okay, that's fine, just talk about like when you got here finally, because it can be just a very traumatic experience as to why they had to come, or on their journey here, and once they finally got here. So yeah, it can be very touchy.
would you mind sharing like just like a quick little story of one person that you may have had their story really stuck out to you a little bit?
Oh, that stuck out to me.
And then we got to plug it so people know to watch that
Oh my
episode.
goodness, you just putting me on the spot. Okay, well this story was actually mind blowing to me because she didn't have hardship. She said literally like you would have thought I had the perfect life.
Yeah,
She had went to the university, so she had a degree in HR. She was like, I think it was like an HR director at that time. She was like, I had in my apartment, I had a good paying job, I was living on my own. Um, and she was just like, I don't feel fulfilled. I don't feel like this is my purpose. So she moved here to find her purpose. And I was like, what? Like, who just leaves a whole country to find their purpose? And then she ended up moving here for actually just a few years. And then she ended up building her business
yeah,
here. And then she ended up moving back. So she like, was able to find her purpose here, and I was just like, that was mind blowing to me, because it's like you hear mostly people leaving poverty and
yeah.
gangs and violence and things like that, but she was like, no, I had a good life back home, and I just didn't feel fulfilled.
That's crazy.
I know.
That
I
that
know.
that's crazy. I met somebody recently at my job that had a similar story where they were well off, and you know, I'm naturally curious slash nosy, so I was just like,
Slash nosy.
because like you hear stories where people are like well off, and it's like
Yeah.
we're over here trying
Mm-hmm.
to do our
Yeah.
thing and be able to go to places like Target and ball out on the dollar section and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like, if you were good in your, what are you doing
What
here?
are you here?
I'm
Yeah.
like,
What are
well,
you doing
go
here?
home or let me fill your shoes over there. Like, you still got stuff going on.
Yeah.
So, like, yeah, it bugs me out when I hear stories like that. But that's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to the second portion of this interview, I did want you to let us know, because you actually have your podcast,
Mm-hmm.
which is super awesome, where you're talking about immigration and all sorts of stories. But then you also have a business,
Yeah.
which I was very fortunate to go to one of the events that you made,
Thanks.
and
Yeah.
you teach people how to get started with a podcast.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So I teach people how to get started in the simplest way, because to me my biggest thing is just starting. I feel like that's the hardest part. It's like people have an idea, right? But they don't know how to actually implement that idea or put it into action to actually get that idea going. So even like I said, even when I started, I was overwhelmed with all the information. So I was just like, okay, I just have to like sit down and like, okay, step one, what
Mm.
is step one, step two, step three, step four, until I actually put my podcast out there. So I started my podcast literally on my phone. I plugged in the microphone. I had no idea what I was doing. I always say, go check out my very first episode. It's horrible. It's me and my cousin going back and forth, like, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Because I
Yeah.
had no idea what I was doing, but I knew that I wanted to do this, and I just wanted to put it out there. So in the podcasting groups that I'm in Facebook, I see that a lot. I see a lot of beginners that are very overwhelmed, or they're asking like, how do I start a podcast? Like, they just need that guidance, right? And what I like to say is that podcasting is not hard. There's just a lot of behind the scenes work,
Correct.
and you
Yes.
don't know that until you're actually doing it,
Yeah.
right? So that really is what drove me, is just seeing the need out there of like helping people navigate like how to actually launch, set a plan, and things like that. And so yeah, so that's how I got started with that, being a podcast coach. So now I've been doing a monthly free masterclass. I've been doing it virtually, but the one you went to was the one that I did in person, and it's just literally going through what exactly you need to get started. and just providing all the information and then asking questions, because yes, you can get a lot of things from Google and finding like that, but then you also like it brings up more questions. So it's like,
Right.
okay, so then how do I do this, or how do I do that, or should I do this versus that? So that's what really sparked that. And so I have a 6-week course that people can take. We meet online once a week for an hour, and then I'll tell you like, okay, on this week we're going to work on XYZ. So then you can get that together, and then once you work on that, it'll kind of piggyback next week, so you'll use that and take it on to next week. And the reason why I do it that way is because I don't want the process to feel overwhelmed, because you don't want to do everything at once, because then you're going to feel overwhelmed, and then you're like, no, I give up, this was too much.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like just take it step by step, piece by piece, to then get it all together within 6 weeks. And it could take less than 6 weeks. Like it was 6 weeks for me. But if you really, really want to, very ambitious and just, go for it, you can do it in less than 6 weeks. But yeah, I just saw the need. I say that I want to be the person that I needed when I started.
Yeah.
I actually took a podcasting course after I started, and then I was like, man, I should have done this before. I did it backwards. But I did learn. I did learn in that podcasting course and stuff that I was able to implement into my show. But yeah, I just want to let people know that it's really simple to start. You can definitely start, with a basic mic, your phone or your laptop, and then invest from there.
Yeah.
Because you also, what if you do, get all this equipment, invest in everything, and then you're like, I don't like this.
Yeah.
Yes, you can sell it, but you already like invested a lot. So just simply just to get people to start, and then from there they can invest in equipment, they can, make it a whole thing. And I love podcasting. I know you're a podcaster, and like just the whole concept of it, I absolutely love everything about it. And so if there is, something that you have in your heart, or a story or something that you want to share, and you think that podcasting is the way to go, I am 100% a cheerleader for you. Like, do it. Like, let's do it. Let's set up a plan and do it. And some people need another person to hold them accountable, because that was the other thing. I saw a comment once. This lady was like, I wanted to start a podcast for 5 years. I sat on it for 5 years, and she was like, but once I like really was serious about it, she was like, the best thing I did was hire a coach, someone to keep me accountable.
Yeah.
And then I was like, well, that's really good self-awareness, that she knew she needed someone. Because again, like, we can, want to write a book or want to do something, but it's just like the unknown, and we hold ourselves back. So I want to be that person to encourage, to help, and get that show out in the world.
Yeah. I think, so I'll start off with saying thank you for inviting me to that event that you had. I started my journey back in I think May, right? And I'm one of these people that I learn on the go.
Yeah.
And like you said, like just attending your event where you broke everything down and you were like, this is what you could do, this is what you need. You kind of gave us like a map of how to ultimately get into podcasting with all the resources that you need. And you're right, I don't think it takes much unless you get overcomplicated with certain things. But just the structure that you broke everything down was so awesome. I was like,
thanks.
oh man, Heidi's the real deal up there.
Thanks.
And then like even offering the course that you have, I think is so beneficial for anybody who's trying to start off. Because like I never saw the importance of having a coach until like, I would say maybe a couple months ago.
Yeah.
When I started working, like our supervisors are called coaches, and they sit beside you, and it's like, I've been in sales all my life, and it's like sometimes you feel like, oh, I got this covered.
Yeah.
And then when you have the right coach come beside you and just like walk you through certain parts that you know what I mean, like just talk to you, and like there's a certain dynamic there. There's a certain like, I don't know if you want to call it rhythm, that when you have somebody next to you, it just gives you a little bit more confidence, because that person, not only are they trying to teach you something and kind of help you tweak certain things, but they're also rooting for you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, you need that encouragement.
Yeah, and I think that's so powerful. And just like seeing the things that you offer, like even like during my podcast, like there's so much stuff going on, and especially for somebody doing it by themselves, like you gave a lot of gems that day with different things that just organization wise, like my biggest issue right now is time management.
And
I think I told you that day too, but it's just like having a full-time job, having a
Mhm.
family,
Mhm.
all these different things, and Christmas is coming by,
Oh my God,
overtime's being
yes.
offered. Like I want my podcast out there, and then you drop there's a way to monetize your podcast. I was
Mhm.
like, you had my full
Yes.
attention. I was like, tell me more, Heidi,
Yes,
please,
yes, yes.
because ultimately, how awesome, my favorite word, how dope would it be to be able to make a living, doing this?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's my ultimate goal right there.
yeah, it's a
I
beautiful
tell
thing.
my husband, I was like, I just want to be a full time podcaster. Like, that's it. Like,
Yeah,
I want to work when I want to work, not when someone tells me.
yeah,
I mean, don't get me wrong, I love my job. Good benefits and everything, but like podcasting is my thing. And
yeah.
I actually did not realize that I was actually a good interviewer until I started podcasting. And a guest of mine, afterwards, she heard the episode and she reached out and she was like, I said more than what I thought I was gonna say. She was like,
Mm,
"You really know the questions to ask to like pull things out of people." I was like, "Oh," and then she was like, "But you also make people feel comfortable, like
yeah.
sharing." I was like, "Oh, like that is like the greatest compliment ever."
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so. What did it for me was I think I told you this, but like I'm very curious about
Hmm.
everything, and I'm like a kid. The
It's
curiosity,
like,
like,
but why?
yeah, but
Yeah.
why? And I'm that kid in the classroom. That, well, I didn't do good at school, but I'm saying like, let's say for example at work, if I don't know something, I'm not gonna wait till later. I'm gonna ask right then and there, and I'm
Yeah.
gonna, why are we doing this? Or like, and I'm naturally just curious, and
Mhm.
like people would tell me, like, I think one or two people were like, "Tu pregunta mucho." Translation, you ask a lot.
You ask a
But it
lot.
wasn't the person I was asking. The person I was asking was answering my questions. It was somebody that came like randomly
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and like just threw off my flow. But like that's when I started realizing, and then when I got the idea of podcasting and I did my first episode, which that's another thing that I was so thankful that you mentioned that day, like the time frame. I'm not gonna give out all her nuggets, by the way. You got to tune in and give her a call or reach out on social media. But there were things that you said then that I was just like, oh, okay, like I'm not supposed to do that. Like all these recommendations that you gave, and that's why I think, um, you know, first and foremost, I wanted you on the show because of the conversation about immigration. Me and you share a
Mhm.
lot there because both our parents came from different countries into the United States. And then the second thing was the business that you have about podcasting, which
Mhm.
I think is so awesome. And one of the things that I think is important for people to take away also is, maybe I'm giving out too much information here about myself, but like that day that I went to your event, um, my job was offering overtime
Mm.
and Christmas and all this
Yeah,
stuff,
yeah.
right? And then I got stuck in traffic for like an hour and a half, and I was like focused. I'm like, I'm getting there. And the reason I'm saying that is like, ultimately, for whatever you want to do, you always have to remember that you make time for the things that you want,
Yes.
and you don't make time for the things that you don't
Yep.
want. And I knew, like, when we had spoken prior to the show, like all that stuff, I knew you're like an intelligent, not like, you are an intelligent woman. Your
Thank you.
conversations are amazing. You have an awesome husband, family, and just talking to you, I knew right away, like, I got to be at this
Yeah.
event. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I know I was a little bit late, but like just the content that you provided, and I knew like my expectations were there for what you were about to drop, but it just superseded that.
It's crazy. I had just recently heard this business coach saying that when you're about to do something that's going to help you level up, things come in your way
Hmm.
to see if you really want
Of
it or not.
course. Yeah.
So that's like the example that you just gave me. Like, oh, the job is offering me overtime. Oh, more money, or
Yeah.
do I go and listen to
Yeah.
this
No, I was just like, oh,
event and
this
then the
is
traffic and everything? So, not saying that I'm gonna level up your life, but I'm saying like,
no. That's the thing. Like,
it's like, yeah, when you invest in yourself,
yeah,
right? Whether it's a webinar or a networking event or something, and it's just like it's gonna help you, like things just come up that
yeah,
will try to prevent you from getting there.
yeah. And I don't know if you know this yourself, but you're a source. Like, I see how much content you put on social media, how much work goes behind. It's not like just a post with a picture.
No,
Like
it's a
you
lot of
like,
work.
and the like the work that she puts up there. Like, I may not comment on it, and maybe I'm horrible at that, but
No,
like
that's fine.
I see everything that you put up there, and I'm like, damn, she takes the time. Like, in order for you to get like just a checklist for
Yeah.
chores in the house, it takes you like 2 hours. Heidi's out there putting like a whole formula for podcasting and the things and giving tips that she just gives away knowledge
Yeah.
just off the love. And of course, you have the course that people can tune into and hit you up for. But like, I want to thank you for everything you do on social media. I think it's
Yeah.
super awesome. It gives me that kick in the behind sometimes where I'm just
Okay.
like, I'm not focused on my
Yeah.
podcast, and I'm like, I see
Mm.
you, and I'm like, oh, and so that's what I'm saying. When you
Yeah.
say I'm not gonna love it, like you are, you'd be surprised how many people may not say it, but you level them up just off of you posting,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
that sometimes people need to see that and be like,
Yep, to that reminder.
yeah,
I love learning. I'm a big advocate of like the more you learn, the better you are.
yeah,
And then I'm the type of person like I don't like to hold my knowledge in. I like to share it.
yeah,
And so like whenever I like learn interesting things or facts or anything, like I love to share that. And earlier this year, my job offers the personality test, strength finders.
mhm,
You have to pay for to take the test, but they offer it, and then they offer a class. And I took that test, and my number one strength, it was learner.
mhm,
And when I was reading the description, it was about that I love learning and I can spend hours doing research.
yeah,
And then I, apply what I learned, but then also share. And I was like, oh my God, that's me. That's
yeah,
literally me. And so because of that, like now I'm learning about a different position in my department. So I'm kind of like doing two jobs, right? Two positions right now,
yeah,
just because we're short staffed. But to me, that's just more knowledge that I'm getting, and
yeah,
that's just gonna better myself.
yeah, hundred
If
percent,
even if I don't get the return on investment now, I know that years down the line
yeah,
it could help me. But that's just the person that I am. Like I love learning, researching, and then just sharing. So then that's why I share a lot on the Instagram, a lot of content for podcasters, and again, constantly learning. And it's like even I think you had mentioned also on that event a certain software for podcasting. It's like, oh, I'm gonna look into that because I had not heard of it, but
yeah,
I'm curious. It's like I want to learn and things like that. And I may not apply it for my show, but someone else
yeah.
could apply it
You
to
could provide,
theirs.
yeah,
Yeah.
100%. Well, I want to thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Yeah.
Before you leave, please let them know your Instagram handle, how to
Yes.
find you, your contact information.
Oh, okay. Yes, I hang out on Instagram. My Instagram is my name, so Heidy, Heidy, period De La Cruz, DELACRUZ 13. You can also reach out on my website, HeidyDelacruz.com. And yeah, follow me.
Awesome. Yes, please do follow her. She gives a lot of good content and she'll win you over. You'll tune in. You'll tune in
Thanks.
because I like she every day she's very consistent and she'll give you that kick in the behind. But thank you so much
Thank
for being on the
you. Thank you for
podcast.
having me.
Yes, thank you. And I wish you the best of luck in everything that you do. And we'll definitely be talking some more.
For sure.